Well, once again, the conscience of the entire world has been shaken by Pulwama terrorist act. Well, this time it is again Jammu and Kashmir, it is again India, and the sad part is this, that soldiers who defend the borders, who maintain peace throughout the world, have been killed, and not one, not two, 40 of those. And those soldiers, in fact, represent the entire spectrum of the Indian society, because you can find them in every state from Jammu and Kashmir all the way to Kanyakumari and all the way from east to west. Now the question that we should all be asking, that this 21st century could be a century of peace, but we have begun again on a note that is reminiscent of 20th century. And if we look at it, the maximum violence in the history of humankind has been in 20th century. We had 2 world wars. We came out of the era of colonization. The kind of human violence that occurred all this time is of unimaginable proportion. So there is no doubt about that someone like Mahatma Gandhi would speak about non-violence and would try to make a shift in the consciousness of the world, and to try to make a change in the history of the world to move from violence to non-violence. Well, here we come at the beginning of 21st century again. Ever since the beginning of this century, now we are in 2019. It is 19 years now that again the violence continues to plague our Earth planet. Now, some of the questions that we should be asking, and we should be focusing on Pulwama. What do we gain out of this? What is the ultimate gain for humanity? How does it help people? How does it help the economy of a country or the world? How does it help the youth? How does it help the society? It's a lose-lose situation. And it is the kind of mindset that the humanity has to come out of it in a way that we can make and help create a better world. Now, let us just look at this Pulwama issue as an example. People have already forgotten about 26/11 with all the hype, with all the talk. The entire world committed to eliminate the menace of terrorism. Terrorism still thrives, and it thrives not only in any specific part of the world, but all through the world. Now, if we come to the Pulwama story again, well, people would remember it for a certain period of time, and then there would be a bigger event, a bigger kind of terrorist act, and the world would probably seem to forget about it. Now, why Pulwama? Now, you see that some of the problems of alarming proportions are human-made. I mean, it goes back all the way to the partition of India and Pakistan. Now, India accepted the idea of partition ultimately and moved on. It is a civilized nation. It is a modern economy. It's a highly educated society. This is over a billion people on the move. They have eliminated poverty or are trying to eliminate poverty almost. And the entire world is seeing it. And one of the interesting things that has happened is the era of globalization. We are a global village. We are all interconnected. Now, what happens with these kind of situations when some of the societies have not modernized, have not come up to the civilizational expectations, and those societies are mired in poverty? And in fact, it is that poverty that lingers on over there, aligned with their local politics, aligned with their normal minds. Well, normal, it's difficult to say normal, it's an abnormal mindset, and they continue to actually engage in a kind of terrorism which is of new kind, which is almost an act of war. And that is what has happened in Pulwama. This is a proxy war by a rogue state, by a mindset that is sick, that is engaged in exploiting the poverty, the situation in Jammu and Kashmir. Now the question is that how do we move forward from this kind of scenario? The way we look at it at this point of time is Pakistan has failed as a state and as a nation. It has not lived to the expectations of its own people. It has not become a part of the civilized world community. It has profited from the political situations in Afghanistan or elsewhere in the world in a way to feed its own homegrown terrorist industry. Terrorists are roaming free. Enough is enough. A lot of evidence has been provided to the world community, and Pakistan doesn't seem to stop. It keeps to go on because terrorism has become a profitable industry, probably for this kind of primitive society. So how do we get out of it? Now the question is, terrorism is a new kind of war in the 21st century world. The entire world community has to come together to fight it. This is no country's war, and it is every country's war, in fact. And in that sense, the world community should be asking, well, we talk about promoting good quality of life at this planet. That is feasible only if we have a good economy. We have a very well preserved environment. The people are highly conscientious. It's a spiritual society. We learn from each other, we educate each other, and we create a kind of new kind of creativity, a kind of creativity that creates wealth for all of us. And it is from that perspective the entire world needs to come together to not to look at it as an isolated situation in one geographical location of the Earth planet, but as a problem that hurts all of us no matter where we are. Today it's Pulwama, tomorrow it could be somewhere else. It could be North America, it could be somewhere in Europe, or it could be somewhere else in any other part of the world. And that is the question we should be asking. So how do we move forward? Now, first of all, we need to isolate those societies and those countries that don't live up to the minimum standards of a civilized community. Secondly, the economic network of terrorists need to be hit. And all attempts in this direction with the information technology, the digital economy, and those kind of things, they can be very powerful tools to control and check the menace of terrorism. 3. Jammu and Kashmir. There too, there is a political problem. Nowhere in the history of the world people have been made homeless in their own home. And this is what has happened to the Kashmiri Pandits in the valley. Their contribution is great. They are descendants of a great saint, Rishi Kashyap, on whom the province of Kashmir was in fact named. They have made great intellectual contributions. They are a conscience of the society and several nations, in fact, in the region. Their ideology has spread all over Asia. Those kind of people who created or helped create the cradle of civilization, they have been asked to leave their own home, and they are homeless in their own country. The world has never ever thought about their plight, has never ever thought what happened to those children of India or those children of Kashmir. They have never thought about what they live through every day. I recall one time I had a Kashmiri friend visiting with us from United States. And I also had a great American scientist visiting with us, and we were talking science and discussing things. But all of a sudden I saw some tears in the eyes of this Kashmiri Pandit friend. And he said, you know, I'm talking science here. I have done all good things for the society and the world. I'm so happy to be talking to you about science. But I just couldn't control myself. As I sit and talk science here for the good of the world, there are terrorists who have taken over my home in Jammu and Kashmir. Terrorists are living in my home. I can't go back to my home. Just imagine those kind of people who came out of those situations. They are living with that pain every day all through the world. And on top of that, now we have this proxy war or an act of war, which is promoted by none other than Pakistan, a rogue state. And I think that India has become a soft target. India has its problems. Well, in a sense, it is historical, because right from the time of the Kalinga War, the idea of non-violence that arose, India has been wrapped in the idea of non-violence. And India has forgotten that it lives in a violent world. How you can be non-violent in a violent world? India has to come out of this wrap. It has to strengthen its society by controlling and checking terrorism. Question that we should be asking is, how do we move forward? Is terrorism the future of the world? Or is terrorism a menace that promotes poverty, that kills people, that creates hatred, that destroys peace around the world? It is about time that the entire world community comes together and speaks in one voice and fights the menace of terrorism, which is an act of new kind of 21st century war all over the world, no matter where it is. Let us make 21st century a century of peace. At the end, I salute all those soldiers all around the world for maintaining peace in this hostile scenario. And here in Canada, we have had our own menace of terrorism. We just can't forget that the menace of terrorism arose from the soil of Canada, the Air India bombing that destroyed so many peaceful, noble souls. We have had our parliament attacked by a terrorist over here. So what happens in Canada or anywhere else in the world, it is problem of the entire world community, which is a global village. Let's fight it together. Thank you.